we started Heavy Connect a couple years ago, and the idea was that with the evolution of mobile devices and the capabilities, that there's a lot of operational complexity that can really be simplified. And we started it here in Salinas. It's where home is, but as we started to ramp up the company, we needed a lot more technical expertise than what we started with. We needed to know a lot more about the startup space and the venture space to make sure that we grew the company in a healthy way. And so getting involved with 500 startups was a huge strike of luck for us to go through that process. And I think early on we tried to do the best we could, but in operating in basically a vacuum away from technology, we weren't able to do it alone to build that perspective. And so to be part of the 500 program was, I think, essential and certainly fortunate for us as a company.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think at the time when we met in an interview room, in a boardroom in San Francisco. Now 500 is pretty down to earth. It's not like your traditional venture firm in the Valley. We're 50% men and women out of 120 people. We're very focused on diversity. In the same way we're focused on diversity of the companies that we bring in. So we've invested a lot globally, not just in the US, and we also invest in a lot of industries that people sitting in San Francisco maybe don't think about as much. And that's why I guess, can I call you like a maven, like a maven like Patrick, who's thinking on like the tech and the farm side is really interesting to us. At the time, we actually had a conference like a few years ago that was all about non-sexy tech. And so I think like these like kind of industrial applications is something that we've been looking at more and more because they haven't been touched as much, and they've kind of still stayed lingering and haven't had this like bond between what traditional San Francisco Silicon Valley is and Central Valley is. So I think that's kind of interesting. I mean, maybe, I don't know, what was it like when you were coming through the interview process for the first time? Like, is that something, how are you feeling at that point? Had you pitched a lot of VCs?
No, I had done some pitching early on and didn't get a lot of traction on our idea because it's not that sexy technology that you hear, that changes, every few months. And so we were more about the working in the field tools, but it's that technology to simplify problems that were certainly pain points, but not really topics of the moment, right? So for those that aren't familiar with Heavy Connect, we're from Salinas. Our mission is to make sure that we build an ecosystem locally and leverage the tremendous talent that's available here through the Hartnell program with the CSN3 program, and bring the technologists homegrown and bring them up through there. But then also leverage our community of growers. An analogy I often use is that if you're going to make a pair of basketball shoes, make them fit Michael Jordan, and then everybody will want to wear them. Well, so this is being in Salinas and working with growers in this area and using this as our proving ground for our technology follows that methodology. So as we started that, we certainly needed to understand where we stood as a startup with the rest of the startup scene in the Bay Area. And so some friends of ours at Ag Funder said we would be a good candidate to apply for the Batch 18 program. And I think that Mike Betts told me this on a Tuesday, and the application deadline was like Thursday. And so I had to put that together really quick. But things started happening, and I think it was one of the thoughts that I didn't have much expectation that it would really bear fruit, but it really came together.
What was your first impression when you came into the 500 office?
I was pretty nervous. Rivka Garcia was there with me. She graduated from the first cohort of the CS3 program. And what we thought was the reason why we got in was because we brought a couple flats of strawberries from Watsonville. And so we bought our way in.
It's definitely always a positive if founders bring in their products.
Yeah, and then the other thing is in the interview process, I think one thing that certainly helped us was when I started Heavy Connect, we needed to demonstrate that what we were doing was a viable solution for the market. So we actually did kind of an informal Kickstarter where we went to growers and said, if we build this, would you use it? And so we had a stack of customer agreements of people that were waiting for the technology. And fortunately, because this is a mecca of large, successful agriculture, the names that we had on those contracts, I think, really resonated with the interview groups at 500.
Yeah, so I mean, I guess maybe for people that aren't familiar, when you come into like a 500 seed program interview, you're basically, it's very quick fire. You're going to have 2 interviews that are 15 to 20 minutes in 2 rooms. The whole thing will take probably about an hour, but you're kind of, and you're sitting in there. It's usually like, I can't remember. Was it just you? Or you were just by yourself?
Rivka was with me.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then you have like 3, 4, 5 people on the other side of the table, so it can be kind of intimidating because the interview is so short. You don't have a ton of time to explain, which is kind of on the later end of the program. Once you get in, we spend a lot of time on storytelling and how you work on your pitch and how you think about fundraising, because a lot of founders get so deep into what they're doing that simplifying can be an issue. But I feel like for Patrick, you're actually pretty good at pitching, which is kind of surprising.
A lot of practice. And I think that when we're taking that agriculture perspective to the technology industry, it's probably a similar challenge that a lot of technologists have in explaining the technology to agriculturalists. And so actually trying to simplify the message and explain in 6 or 7 words or less your immediate value becomes critical. Otherwise you lose your audience. And
yeah.
we participated in the CSU Monterey-based Startup Challenge, and we're fortunate to win that in 2016 because we're delivering a tight message of immediate value.
Yeah. And we had a few interesting kind of industrial startups in your batch. On Farm was in there too. We had one for like pipeline. So it's definitely been uptick in that sort of in this sort of investment for us.
Yeah, it was nice for us too, because being in there with 40 some startups, to have other ag tech companies and friends in our network like Lance from On Farm, but also other industrial tech companies like Big Controls and leveraging new technologies to solve age-old problems really gave us a place within the incubator, because there were also some startups that we really couldn't recognize their technology or their solution, not because it's not tremendously valuable, it's not the world we live in. And so we were fortunate enough to have some contemporaries that we weren't such a fish out of water.
Yeah, I think that's actually like a really core part of the 500 program is we actually have this space, we have 2 spaces in San Francisco and in Mountain View, where these 40 plus companies are all spending 4 months together. And that network, speaking from someone who went through an accelerator program when I first moved here 5 years ago, that is like the one thing I think that maintains a lot of strength and a lot of value from those relationships from that point forward.
Yeah, the startup life is a very lonely life, and having your conviction about a solution that is innovative by definition means that not many people either agree with you or understand it yet, because it's not ubiquitous. And so having the camaraderie of the batch was tremendous. It was basically like summer camp, right, where you just build the friendships and everybody's leaning on each other. So the challenges became far more manageable because of the community.
Yeah, that's very true. So, like, when you were going through the program, then like what stands out when you think back on it, like either on this was like the hardest thing ever, or this was like the greatest thing ever?
Both, both, because we were forced into scaling and being aggressive in our growth, where if we didn't have that exposure to top startup community in 500 startups, we could have easily said, well, we'll get there eventually. Where I think the philosophy of startups and scaling is that it has to be immediate, and growth has to occur continuously at an acceptable rate. And so it pushed us, and that I think made us a healthier startup because of it, and made sure that we always maintained the idea of scaling.
Yeah, and you grew a decent amount through the program too, right?
Yeah. We I think we felt pretty successful about what we were able to achieve, both in terms of adding additional growers onto the platform for the version that everybody was using, but then also I don't think that I would have put as much time into marketing without 500. And so I think like Chandini and the group with the marketing Hell Week really puts together a way to beat you into going the right way with marketing and making sure that you just stay hungry.
Yeah, we have this thing called Marketing Hell Week, actually formerly known as Marketing Hell Week. Now it's just called Hell Week because it's marketing and sales. But the 500 Startups program is essentially a growth program. Like, how do we figure out how to turn your growth machine on? You know, Patrick came in with customers, with investors, like, you know, he had like that foundation built, but now he just needed to he wanted to figure out what are these like growth hacks that I can do that will help me speed up my sales process, will help me bring in more leads. And so we get pretty nitty gritty and that sort of stuff, so.
Yeah, and I think that outside the walls of 500, the brand and the association really helped us with validation to growers, and I think the same thing with like Western Growers and the Grower Shipper and the Farm Bureau. Having those associations and support really opens up doors for customers, and being part of 500, I guess I didn't appreciate it, but apparently startups don't have VCs calling them, and so having so many inbound investor calls is a result of being part of our affiliation with 500.
And then after those like 4 months, and you hit this demo day where, you know, you're pitching 500 investors in a room, what was like the lead up to that? Like, were you nervous?
Yes, I would have been more nervous if we didn't do it on Halloween.
That's right.
Tristan was dressed up like a genie fortune teller, and so it really
we don't take ourselves too seriously.
Yeah, no, it was a really good time, and basically a big party. So it was both pitching, and there were a lot of investors. I mean, it was high stakes, but also they take the pressure and modulate it with a good amount of fun. So we had a good time at the Palace of Fine Arts in San Francisco.
We called it Demo-ween. I think that was the first time we actually ever had done that. We started like theming our demo days because, you know, there's a lot of accelerator programs, there's a lot of incubators. Demo days are starting to become a thing that's not as interesting for everyone to go to. And so this one in particular, it was like right before Halloween. Everyone was encouraged to dress up. Even investors and VCs dressed up. It's kind of a weird vibe, you know, and like VCs, you know, shed the suit coat and they start, you know, in the puffy jacket thing, and then they start, you know, hanging out with you with like a mask on. I think Tim Draper was dressed up on stage as Count Dracula, right?
Yeah.
So it was a good time, and then all that build up for like a 2-minute pitch that you had to give.
Yeah, and I think that also helped us, tighten up the pitch even more, because you're hitting 3 or 4 main points, and then it's let's talk, and so it allowed the main message to get through. And there was a lot of pitch practice and preparation, and the tremendous amount of resources that 500 has. I think it'd be good to talk about that for a minute. Is there's a lot of perks that come with it, as far as like credits for AWS and Microsoft Azure, but there's also the resources that come in. There's continuous content and programming in the 500 office, so everybody's working on one side of the building, and on the other side there's presentations, people are preparing their pitches, and we're meeting with people that really tap into provide resources to all sides of the business. So we're hearing from like accounting, we're hearing from legal. It's an accelerator.
Yeah, and we still get to be friends after. You know? So I'm kind of, I'm curious too, like where are you at now? Like where's Heavy Connect today? And I guess, what are we, a year out of the program now?
Yeah. So actually when I was here last year on the very day, we got the notification that we were accepted into the 500 program, and so
right.
I was running around. That wasn't Starbucks, that was a room of startups. I was running around hugging everybody, and it was a big day for us. But 2016 has been huge. A lot of validation. We've expanded our footprint beyond the Salinas Valley. We're taking on new features and functionality into our product for greater utilization within the enterprises. And then we're also scaling within the enterprises that we've signed up. So that's a great strategy for other startups that are involved, is that you don't have to go farm by farm in the Midwest. You get in with some key guys here. Not only will their operations scale so that you don't have to do outside sales, but they will take you around the world with them in their global footprint. So this is like a jet stream for ag tech adoption. And this year's been really big for us. I think actually if we have any challenge, it's not about growth and scale with sales. It's more, can our product scale and keep up with where we're going?
Yeah, like you were saying, you have so many big farms on the platform, you can't even mention their names.
Yeah, we've been fortunate, and I think so. One of the big benefits that we've had in the time of Heavy Connect, to be part of 500 and also be in Salinas with the Center for Innovation and Technology, is to exist in those two different environments. I don't think we would have achieved the growth or the client list that we have if we didn't make sure that we were committed to agriculture and operating within our market, but then also making sure that we're scaling and we represent a model startup, or as much as we can be for Silicon Valley and for the Bay Area. So for other startups looking to get involved, this is the place to do it. If you have operations somewhere else, make sure that you're at least involved here with our local associations and the Western Growers Center. But then there's a lot of potential to get into accelerators like 500. I don't think we could. I'm sure we couldn't be where we are today without that experience.
So what about, I'm a Minnesota kid originally, so I'm kind of curious, your spread, how do you look at like the California, Central Valley ag scene versus the Midwest?
Yeah, and we get that question quite a bit. How does technology that works in what's termed specialty crops translate to commodity crops in the Midwest? And the trade-off is that we have a smaller geography, a smaller footprint where the crops are being grown, but high dollar value. And so the geography is enormous in the Midwest, and the dollar value is not as large. So you do have a trade-off. Now, when it comes to Heavy Connect, we have a lot of people, a lot of equipment in a very tight space, and it's constantly moving around. We're renting different land. Equipment is being transported down to the Yuma Desert. So there's a lot of dynamics happening in a very small spot. But if you were at the Hartnell event earlier when we were doing a demonstration, you would see that the drive between the office and where you're going to be in the field can be well over an hour. And so to go out to the field, fill out a piece of paper, drive back to the office, then get back to the field and finish your work, you've wasted about 2.5 hours of the day that you can leverage mobile devices for. So there's application for tools like Heavy Connect for enterprises of scale because of the vast geography in the Midwest.
A lot of windshield time, right? Like you were saying.
A lot of windshield time, a lot of radio stations. Yeah.
So what, like, with, thinking about Salinas and kind of being here and being a company that started here, how does that place into your mindset, as a tech startup?
That's a good question, because we think about that a lot, especially as things are taking off for us, and we're evolving as a company. That we reflect on how important it is to make sure that we continue to provide value for this area and the growers in this community. It's got to fit the Salinas Valley grower, the California grower, so that when we want to scale internationally, to South America, to Australia, that this sets the framework for that. And so I don't think that we could have gotten to where we are if we started this geographically somewhere else, and I certainly don't think that we can get to where we're going if it weren't for the Salinas Valley.
Well, I think we're almost out of time. I don't know if there's anything else that we should talk about, but
yeah.
Any last words?
No, really excited that everybody's here. If while you're here, just please take it in and realize what a special place it is culturally with Steinbeck. I mean, you're in East of Eden, you're in Grapes of Wrath country right here, and the pastoral agriculture that happens here and how we take care of the land is critical. We have so much amazing infrastructure to support this that I think you'll see that happen when the enormous amount of trucks and the different operations that we have all facilitate to make this possible, so that everybody has the vegetables and nutrition that they have in the field year-round.
Awesome. Thanks, Forbes, for having us. Thank you for having us.
Thank you.